Hi guys, Brandy here. I'm going to take you through some of the steps of how I start rendering skin tones with Copic markers. So I have my light pencil sketch here, some areas not so light, but it's fine because we're going to be erasing this stuff as we go. You always want to erase your pencil lines before you lay marker ink down, or the ink will the lines will be set under the ink. So with that in mind, I usually start around one of the eyes, usually whichever has the most value. So we're going to start over here on Mal on this eye. So I'm going to lighten it out with the eraser to where I almost can't see it. I mean, obviously you need to leave something behind, but you want to get it as light as you can. And then I'm going to start, we'll start with E11 on this one. And I'm just going to kind of dab in. This is both to test my color choice and to just start to lay some texture in. Part of what I like to do with my skin tones is to have some of that texture of the skin that otherwise gets lost if you blend out too much. So just a couple little dabs just to kind of set in motion and see where things are at. E00 next, and this is what I'm going to primarily use. This and R000 will be my main go-tos for blending things out. So you notice that I'm not laying one color in over the whole thing and then building up my value. I actually started a touch darker and I'm working my way out lighter. And I'm also going to try to render as much of this area as possible with as much value as possible before I move on. This does a few different things for me. This one allows me to set a good chunk of my value right up front. I'm going to grab the E70 now. This allows me to set a lot of my values right away. Plus, it helps speed me up because I've done that. I'm not second guessing, okay, what color do I move to next, because I've already got several set out. And then it also, I'm not afraid to go too dark, which is one area that I really struggled with for a long time. Was I was always afraid to make something too dark, because it's pretty hard to go back and lighten those dark colors out. It can be done, but it's tricky. So this forces me to drop my darks in really, really early. Come back with that E11. Get those darks in really early, and then I'm not afraid to get too dark because they're already there. So just kind of dabbing. It's a little bit of that feathered type stroke where you lay down and then lift the brush off as you go. And I'm trying not to get to these lines here. I laid down some lines just to help me remember where it shifts, the planes of the face shift, where it's going to get very, very dark very quickly. So grab E71. We're going to keep darkening this spot in the corner of the eye. And I just realized I forgot to lay in my scratch paper. Let's fix that real quick. This is a bleed resistant paper. This is the Copic sketchbook. It is bleed resistant. It is not bleed proof. I can get through just about any paper, even if it says it's bleed proof, I can get through it. So anyway, laying in some more E71, starting to just layer up and darken. One of the things that I like about Copics, which is very similar to working with watercolor, is the more you layer the colors, the deeper and more rich they become. Rather than just jumping straight into that super dark color, if you layer some other colors underneath, that color is just going to be a lot more interesting than just jumping straight into an E77 or E79, which I'll eventually get to around here, but I'm going to work up to it. Here's the R000. Let me get it out. Okay, it's... my cap's stuck. Alright, we'll deal with that in a minute. Anyway, this is one of my major go-tos for blending out colors. Instead of using the colorless blender, which I do use, but for this type of work, I like to use lighter colors to blend rather than the blender. It does a couple different things. So for one, it's going to not remove the color completely. It's going to leave a little tiny bit behind, but it is going to lighten and blend out. And in that same vein, it's not going to remove color, so I'm not just altering and getting rid of what I've already laid down. There are certainly times where I want to do that. I'm also going to lay this into the eye and kind of start to tone that area a little bit. Alright, let's see. I'm going to grab some... Sometimes picking out these first colors is tricky because you want to make sure that you're going to get the right tones. Let's go to E74. Let's start dropping some darks in. Now, this is a little bit more muted than what's going on in my actual reference photo. I can always come back and warm these colors up, but for the moment I'm going to just start to lay some of these darks in, and again come back with the lighter colors. So here's E70. Nope, that's R000. E70 is right next to it. E70, and just dab and start to flick that color out and soften that edge out. Really want to get something with some warmth going here, so I think I'm going to move to an E15. Which is going to be a lot warmer tone than what I've been putting in. And again, this is where the building the depth comes in. Is this color is a lot more interesting now by having some of these other colors layered underneath. And this is how you can actually get a lot of colors in your work without having a lot of markers. If you have the right set of markers, you can do a huge range of color with 20 markers, 30 markers. A lot of my pieces, the big portrait pieces, are usually only about 30 to 40 markers total. Alright, and I want something a little more pink right around the eye. Let's go 83, a little bit darker than 81. So this is R83, and it's definitely on the pinky side, but it's kind of grayed out, muted out, so it's not going to be totally overbearing. But it's enough to just kind of start toning things and tinting a little more red. The skin gets a lot more red right around the nose, so to have a little bit around the eye is not a bad thing. Alright, so R000 is going to help kind of soften this out and blend this out. The area around the eye is still on the light side. I'm going to continue to darken that down. Let's see. E13 sounds good. It's a little bit lighter than the E15 we picked up a bit ago. So a lot of this first stage is kind of, using what you know about the colors of the markers and guessing to try to find which ones are going to work well to achieve the exact tone you want. And this is the E00. I'm going to blend this edge out a little bit, soften that out. You can see how much that's lightening things out already. That's the nice thing about these, is you can lighten colors out. If you do get a little too dark somewhere, bring in a lighter color or the colorless blender and you can soften out an edge and shift colors out a little bit. What you're actually doing is pushing it through the other side of the paper. So if I lift here, you can see it's getting quite heavy back here. That's where I say it's a bleed resistant, so I put that scratch paper under. Alright, let's put some warmer, so no, let's start our PV20s. So the PV23, 25, 29 are a huge part of my work. They're great complements to skin tones, and they cool things off without totally desaturating like grays can. So this gives me a really nice soft value without just graying everything down. So I'm going to bring this into the corner as well, because that whole area is quite a bit darker. Let's do E71 back into the corner. We're going to warm this edge back up, the white of the eye on the other side of the iris there. So have a little definition. one area I do definitely use grays in is in the eyes. So here's a toner 3, which is going to be very, very dark for this. But I want to just start trying to drop some of the darks in. Let's go with toner 0 so I can really soften that out. Again, use those lighter colors to soften and blend out. And I like the toner for the eyes because it's not too warm, it's not too cold. It's a touch warmer than neutral, so it helps just bring a little bit of life into the eye. So that's going to lighten up quite a bit as it dries. So I'm going to come back in the BV25, darken the eye up a little bit, and the shadow. So now you can start to see where things are slowly starting to shape up. Use it along the top edge where the eyelashes are. I like to go back and forth between the BV25, 29, and E70s to really create a nice depth in skin tone. I'm going to drag this 74 down a little bit more. Let us move into the cheek a bit. So come back to that E11, this is what we started with. I'm going to flick this into that lighter area of the cheek where the light's really bouncing off. Soften out some of that on the shadow on the nose, and I'm going to get in here with the eraser and erase this nostril and some of my guidelines just for where shadows are falling through here. E11 is a pretty warm tone for skin. I usually only use it in certain situations, like this particular one where there's definitely a lot of warm light shining on Mr. Reynolds or Mr. Fillion, whichever your choice is there. And let's mark in the eyebrow up here. That little bit of squeaking is kind of one of my first signs that I'm going to need to refill that marker pretty soon, but for the moment, we'll jump to E00 and soften out. So in here I'm doing more of a circular fill motion. I'm not trying to feather in, but I'm going to blend that softer edge of feathering from the E11 just by going over it repeatedly with the E00. Bring in some of this E83, or R83 rather, just pink this area up. Again, the nose and cheeks are always more red than the majority of the rest of the face. So I'm just going to drop some of this in here just to have as that undertone. I can always come back with, we'll do E13 here, come right up to that edge line. I'm covering over that E80 or R83. I keep saying that this morning. R83, but it has been affected now by having that R underneath. You can really play with color theory with these markers and getting tones to shift just slightly by what colors you lay over and under each other. Bring E70 back out here and just kind of tone that down just a little bit more. You can see what a difference the color is right here, where that's the pure color of the marker. That's it being laid over 3 other colors. So again, you can tint and tone things just by what colors you layer together. Bring some of the E11 back in to soften that edge a bit, and E13. Eyes creeping me out, so let's go fix that. Alright, I need a really dark grayed out blue. So I'm going to grab B99, which is getting a little bit low from doing the Thor piece a couple weeks ago, but it should have enough ink right now to get this eye started. So right now I'm using this B99 just to kind of follow the major edge of the eye. There's a little bit of light playing through here, so I don't want to completely drown the whole thing with this color, but I do want to at least get some of the iris established. Alright. Kind of feel like I want to put some blue-green into there, so let's try BG75. I'm just going to dab it along the edge of that B99. Both are on the dark side. The B99 is clearly much darker, but this will help soften some of that color in around that white of the eye, where the highlight is on the eye. You can always come back and add highlights back in on top, and if this gets too saturated, that's definitely what I'm going to have to do. But in the interim, take the BG72, which is the lighter version of the 75, and just dab that in just to help create a little more depth in that eye. Drag that across where the B99 has been. Alright. So now we actually feel like we're getting somewhere on this. I'm going to bring out E79 because that is my nice deep dark that I like to use. Let me just toss that in for the iris right now. I'm going to bring that around here for the flashes. And now that I'm starting to drop some darks in, I can really see where I need to darken some of my values. And this is why I like to put these in really early. I can tell that this area is not dark enough yet. And especially once this starts getting built in. And I'm just going to flick right up to the edge, try not to go over too much. Let's see, E13 right along this edge, and I'm going to, again, just dab and kind of feather back into it. I don't want to lose the lights that I've established right along that edge. Excuse me. And E00 just to help blend and soften some of that out. So that got a little over. I'm going to use the E00 to push that out. And you want to be careful when you're taking a light color with a colorless blender and pushing a dark color like that. If you're not feathering the ink out, you can wind up with a heavy ring of ink just around the edges where it dries. But you can go over a lighter color or a darker color with a lighter color, and it's not going to hurt the markers. If you do get a little bit of cross-contamination, usually it's reds that will do it, or some blues, just scribble it off on a piece of scratch paper and it'll be fine. Alright, E13 again, I'm going to continue to shift this little bit of dark that got a little too far over there. This area is pretty wet, so I'm going to let it sit for a minute and dry, and then I'll come back to it and keep tweaking on it. Sometimes when it gets too wet, it's just not really going to do anything anymore, so you want to let it sit, let it dry, and then you can come back and tweak on it further. So in the interim, I'm going to come over here to the nose and continue working out this shadow a bit. Try to tone this cheek down just a bit more. The brighter light is actually in this area of the eye than the cheek itself, although there's a hit of light right around the nostril. So I'm trying to tone that down a little bit without getting too crazy. So it's the E11 over the E70 that I just flicked in there. And you can use the same color to go over itself, and it will darken slowly. It won't be a very drastic dark, which is sometimes what you want. You don't always want it to get really, really dark or have to jump to the next color. Alright, I'm going to grab the R000 here and use that to soften this eyelid out a bit and help lighten that out a bit. It got a little dark as we were moving through there. I'm also going to hit that one spot we were just talking about. That should be the lighter. Alright. So as I'm looking at this spot around his eye, I actually want to bring some B60 into this. Just want to tone this skin right under the eyelid down a little bit. And while it doesn't appear to do a lot, because it's not dumping a lot of color on, the B60 is doing a lot to tone through here. And just to very subtly shift the color of this skin. I use this color a lot with the Thor piece, just to help shift the skin tones so that it would meld with the blue of the background more. So now I'm going to bring out BV29. BV29 and E79 are two of my favorites together for getting really beautiful deep darks without hitting black. And it's just a much more interesting tone. Plus this is going to help cool this side down, so it'll play those shadows a little bit better than just leaving that E79 alone. This is a color I go through a lot of, especially when I'm doing portraits, but it's just such a gorgeous deep blue-purple that works so beautifully with E79 for getting these deep skin tones. Especially a piece like this that has a lot of shadow going on. I'm going to use a lot of these two markers. In fact, there's a lot that's just kind of lost edges in this piece, so I'm just going to go ahead and drag out beyond the neckline and use the BV29. Wow, I can't get any of my colors straight today. Use that BV29 and layer that in. Get this back and forth going, but that's just really going to help darken and cool that area off. That's another important part of using the blue violets, is you're cooling the shadows down. If you're familiar with the basic principles of light and color in artwork, you want a warm light like this, you're going to need a cold shadow. So that's the best way to get a cold shadow on skin without totally drowning it in blue, which looks a little funny, especially on women, but the blue violets work very, very well in place of blue. Alright, E74. I'm just going to kind of finagle down this nose a little bit more. And I'm just going to keep jumping back to this eye as I continue. Again, I'm going to keep working these little bits of value in and find that, okay, this little spot needs tweaked, this little thing needs tweaked, I need to fix this. And that's just kind of the process that will go on here for a while. Just keep feathering the colors into each other. E71, feathering out for the forehead. And now that area that I said got too dark earlier doesn't look quite so dark now, because it's got that really, really dark blue violet and brown mixture going next to it. I'm going to bring that E83 or R83 in again and just warm this back up. That little bit of red. So now, as I'm looking at this, I can tell that area in the corner of the eye that I thought was way too dark earlier is not nearly dark enough. So I'm going to grab our W6 and darken that down a little bit. So this is a warm gray, and I'm trying to leave the edge of the eyelid there. That's going to be catching light, so I want to just drag just a little bit of this gray, this warm gray around the eye, but not so much that it's going to start drowning out color. Alright, R83 again. I'm going to hit the corner of the eye here and get the tear duct in. So I have a lot of colors out on the desk at the moment, but as you can tell, you know, skin is not just one color. So you sometimes need to drop a few extras in there. About to have company. Hi, kitty. Alright. little more BB23. Which is a little bit dark right there, so I'm going to take E70 and soften that out, warm it back up a little. BB23 again. I'm going to get this little bit of the eyelid. And E11, soften all of that out and kind of bring it all together. So this becomes just a lot of back and forth after a while. Just grabbing from the same little pile of colors. Now that I have a better majority of what's going to go into the face already picked out, I can just keep juggling between these. E74 for the eyebrow. And I use that also to, again, soften that transition. Bring that down. More of the nose going. So again, just taking lighter colors, softening things out, moving on to the next tone. So I'm actually going to grab R11 here to shift into the nose. It's a little bit pinker tone, but it's fairly similar to the E's we've been using. Bring it into the cheek as well. Just kind of spread it around. You don't ever want to use one color in one spot. You always want to spread it around a little bit. So if you bring a new color in, you know, see where else you can stick it in or layer it in. So I'm going to bring it around the edge of the nostril here. And erase out the nose so I'm not getting those lines set in with the ink. I'm just going to dab it in and try to add a little bit of texture back into the cheek. It's looking a little too smooth. Let's see. E15, and start bringing some of that really dark shadow up. We want to tone that back, so E71. It's not darker than that color, but it's going to tone it and shift it over a little bit. Get that R000 out. Really, really pale color, but it's great for adding just that little bit of tint to an area that has a lot of light on it. Use it through here again. Actually, I think I will get colorless blender out for that spot. And just drag it along and flick off. And that's slowly going to lighten that out. I feel like this got a little too dark with the addition of that BB23 in there. So I'm just going to drag it over just a touch. That actually does need a refill here momentarily. But that will start to, as it dries, it will lighten that area out. The 79 out here, E79, gonna define that nostril a little bit in that shadow. And the nostril there. Just kind of flick it around a little bit, bring it in. Drag it just along that lower edge of the jaw. There's quite a bit of light on his neck, so I don't want to get too carried away. Just want to flick some of that up and in. Bring that BB29 in just a little here. I'm going to lighten some of that E79 out, so I want to leave some of that not touched with the BB29. E74, so I'm come back and lighten some of that E79 back out. Again, with it's the E71 now that I'm using to lighten out and just to start some of these other little bits of shadow that I want to work in. So that's basically how I handle this. The whole face is going to be done in a very much this manner of just back and forth. Now that I have the majority of my colors picked out, I'll just keep using those, occasionally adding a new one as necessary. But that's pretty much the gist of how I do my skin tones. Please do let me know if you ever have any questions. I will check comments frequently, so please let me know if you have any questions, and happy coloring!